A lot of that's payroll.
So
That just seems like a big amount.
We cut checks till 30th of December to try to pay out all of our 2020 that we had in our possession that we knew of.
Okay,
So invariably, you hit the end of the month, you're going to have, so any month that we're paying at the end, you're going to see those numbers spike
yeah,
up.
yeah. It just
And it's
seemed
not
like
uncommon at the end of the year because we do try to pay out in the 2020 calendar or 2021 calendar year that which we already have in hand to pay.
Okay, all right.
Plus
All right.
payroll hit
I
that
looked through
week.
the checks that were cut, and I saw some significant checks, and I'm guessing that's leading to this outstanding check number. As far as contractors,
As far as in the
the
2021 outstanding.
$900,000.
I'm sorry, what was the number? Oh, you mean the total was 900,000. Oh,
For the
it was
outstanding
across the
checks.
board. There may have been some, I don't remember, 900,000.
I didn't bring that with me.
Oh, well, payroll would have been in there. Payroll was cut that week too. Payroll would be in there.
Outstanding checks and transfers were 37,000, so it doesn't look like that was in there. I didn't go through the check
Oh, do we think
numbers.
that was in there too? No, that was an ACH. That wasn't a check. Is it, what page are you looking at?
that's a packet page 10 is the summary, but it's not the detail.
I'm looking at the detail. There is payroll in that number.
Well, because payroll
150.
was cut on the
20.
30th. Payroll checks would have gone on the 30th.
Oh, this is completed check report. I don't have the, I just have the completed check report.
Do you have an outstanding
Well, if
checklist
you
you
look at
can
the complete
reference?
check report, you can see, how much went out on the 30th, and just in and of itself, nonetheless, the 16th, with the way the mail's been running. I'm just looking through here, 316,000 was our sewer payment. So we paid that right at the end of the year. Looks like we had some healthcare, roughly 50,000. Our big Rumpke payments for trash and recycling was 85. So those look to be some of the bigger numbers at the, right at the end of the year that certainly would have been outstanding.
PNC Bank was 284,000 on the 15th. That probably cleared.
That might have been a debt payment. 284,000. Where are you seeing that?
That was on the 15th of December.
On the 30th, I see Cincinnati
seeing
Bell, the Waterworks, Jefferson Health Plan, Rumpke. I mean, those are all pretty big.
Oh, back here.
How much was Waterworks?
Is that 284? Is that the sale?
16,972.
That's probably debt. I think he's looking at
No, and I'm
page
looking at
56 is
package
where
page
PNC
60.
is. I'm assuming that's a debt payment, Mark?
Now, this is something that we could probably,
Yeah,
if
So it's
a list of checks, there's probably 10 of them that exceed $100,000
Oh, yeah, I mean,
that could
you have an
explain this.
outstanding check report. It's easy to look at and sort it.
60, yeah.
But
Yeah.
sewer is obviously a big piece of it. But yes, typical that we cut the very last working day of the year to try to get as many of our obligations paid within that calendar year. And then we encumber whatever else we know that we can't get paid, and carry it into the next calendar year.
Do you want any information on the uncleared checks, or are you good?
Well, it looks like the big check was to the Waterworks
It's a
for
sewer
about a
payment.
third of that outstanding check, so.
Yeah, just for the ones that were cut on the 30th.
I think when there's a big number like that, it'd be helpful to have an outstanding, what makes up that outstanding list, that's all. I mean, that's a large number, especially for a bank rec. That'd be my request, just going forward.
okay, sure. And I don't recall off the top of my head the 284 number. It could have been a debt item, but I can send that out to you.
PNC is usually a debt payment.
It's probably cleared from the 15th.
I would think
It's probably
so.
not, it's probably not in that 922 number.
Right.
I do have another question on this. There's a no account found, removed from file. Looks like a balancing on that.
Right,
For
that was
13.
something we were actually talking about today. So there, I believe it was a check cashing place in California, got its accounts mixed up and sent it to our Fifth Third, which is usually where we get our utility accounts. So we're working on getting that back to them. It was paid to us in error.
Do we use positive pay or negative pay with the banks?
I'm not sure what you're saying.
I don't think so.
That's something that you ought to
I think it's
look
something to look into. Fifth Third, right? That's where the
LCNB.
checking account is.
LCNB.
I'm sure they have that.
LCNB has it too.
That do it.
Yeah. It's a cash management, treasury
It's
management.
a great fraud detection product for somebody trying to cash one of our checks. It's not real.
Look at it.
They call it positive pay at LCNB.
Positive pay. I like it better than negative pay. Because negative pay is on the back end, positive pay is on the front end. So before they pay it, you have to submit a list to them. And if it doesn't match up, then they'll call you or they'll stop the payment. This happened to another organization I was working with, and they had a check, somebody tried to clear a check for about $400,000. So what they did is they photocopied the check from the company and tried to pass it through, and the positive pay caught it because it wasn't on the list. But I think that's going on frequently now. Okay.
Our operating account, our day-to-day account is where? Is it LCNB?
LCNB.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
So,
Utilities runs through Fifth Third, but our operating account is LCNB.
okay. So the person you'd call there is Lisa Emmel.
I've talked to her.
Okay. Good enough. Any other questions?
Hey, John, I would just add that at some point in time, we're obviously going to have to address water revenue. That's the elephant in the corner that we always sort of ignore. If we don't secure grant funds, we don't fix things in the water fund. And by its very nature, enterprise funds are supposed to be ran like a business. And we are now repairing, thanks to grant and loan, water mains that were built back when Teddy Roosevelt was president. And because of that, those people on that street weren't able to have their road resurfaced. It would have been on our road program probably before I got here in 14. And we have a water system, and we sit and hope for grants and loans, and it's really not how we're supposed to run things. We need an emergency generator. I wasn't able to secure grant funding for that, so we have a generator that runs on diesel fuel that requires manual everything. So at some point in time, it's just not. I came from a very small community where I spent 25 years, and we need to address it. It's not popular. So I went through that whole restructuring of our water fund on the minimum billing. But anyone sitting up there or anyone sitting for council chambers or any responsible resident would know that if we're going to run a water business the way we do, and it is by the very nature of business, we need to really look at our revenues and not sit here and worry about whether or not it was a wet year we're not, and that's my responsibility. So it's not really yours, but I'm just telling you it's something I'm going to have to address. And I'll be working with Mark, but it's pretty irresponsible on my behalf to let it keep staying this way because it's unpopular. But at the end of the day, Greg knows how long is that road needed repaired behind your house. Yep. We're just fortunate those people didn't march on City Hall. They're just so happy that we're finally repairing it. But that took 3 years of grant writing, 50% grant, 50% zero interest loan to do this project. So, and if it wasn't for the fact that areas of the Heights are low income, we would have 80% of the water valves in the Heights simply spin when you try to isolate a leak, meaning the people on the Heights, when there's water outages, simply all have to boil their water, where take where Mrs. Governor lives, we can isolate everything. So, that's it's just, I got to fix that. So I'm just telling you, that's one of my focuses in this year, to get that corrected.
So Dave, this would be, the remedy for this would be talking about another rate increase, or?
What I did before wasn't necessarily a rate increase. I modified the minimum. No resident's bill went up more than $7. The vast majority of the residents saw minimal. We are very proud that we have the lowest rates in the state of Ohio, one of the lowest. But we do that to counter the fact that our MSD rates are so ridiculously high, which we can't control. So to compensate to those residents, we say, well, look at how low your water rates are. Meanwhile, the system, they literally repair water mains right next to where they see saddles where they repaired other water mains. They repair water mains, and by just jiggling that main, another leak spits up. It's not the way we should do business. It's all on me. It's not on you guys. But I'll be bringing it to you, showing you the studies and what we did. I'll remind you of what I did with the whole rate structure.
Yeah.
And remember, we did a presentation. So it's my job, but it's time to make this right. And I'm not making it right. Just sort of wishing and hoping. So
But in the end, that's an action of council.
it's an action of council, but
Based on your recommendation on how to
I
make
know.
that fund solvent.
I need to.
At this point, Dave, do you have any idea of a percentage increase overall?
No, I would feather it over multiple years like we have done in the past. We've done these rate increases back when Corey was here, and we would do them over a period of time. So council took one action and the rates went into effect over certain periods of time. I agree with Mrs. Governor. We need to look at our impact fees. We did a complete and total overhaul of our water connection fees. We used to be giving that away, what we charge for meters and connections. It's no shame to tell a developer, you're going to pay us $150,000 to have our water service. So we greatly increased our water connection fees and what we charge for you to be able to utilize our services. So we sort of did that part of it. Now we need to keep working on it. It's not on you, it's on me. I just need you to know that it's going to be coming down the plate towards you.
We didn't include any increases in the 2022
Nah.
budget.
I should have, but I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't.
Any other questions or comments?
Just, we should expect that as an agenda item for next quarter? Okay.
Yeah, I just got to get a couple of things off my plate and then sit with Lisa. Lisa's our utility billing clerk. I really got to sit with Lisa and go over the best way to do this. Prepare a public presentation so council's not out there on their own, so I can come in and show people what we're trying to do. So
You did a great job put together the right sizing of the water rate before. As a member of council at the time.
yeah,
I appreciated that. And I think it's one of the most important things you did was the why. And I think the why in these kinds of potential initiatives is very important to help garner support from the public.
right. So the city just recently, for the first time since 2014, since I've been with the city, for the first time ever, I had to expend over my $15,000 threshold because our water pump field literally went out. And we would potentially not have, now I can flip a switch, but the amount of, and don't get me wrong, it's wonderful to have emergency connections to Claremont County and the city of Cincinnati. But if you think they're giving it to us, holy camole. $58,000 we paid to Claremont County when we were painting the water tower at White Pillars. $59,000. So that's a switch you don't want to flip if you don't have to. And we are very proud of the amount of water we can store in the air. But you can imagine the feeling of knowing, guess what? We're not producing any water because our well field was completely shorted out. Now, we ratified it. I went to council. It wasn't underhanded. That's my job, is to make those decisions. Ultimately, we went to council. We got it all corrected, and the bill wasn't paid until that action. But that's the point. should have been a pump sitting in a box. There should have been this, there should have been that. So, I mean, there's a word that goes for having everything set in backup plans, and we don't always have that. So that's sort of what we're doing.
Okay.
It'd be nice to build a capital fund that is actually a capital fund, that isn't a capital fund that hopes that we're going to get some money and we can use it as a local match. So that's,
So the key point is, it's an enterprise fund.
it's an
It should be
enterprise
run like a
fund.
business.
Should be ran like a business.
Okay.
No, that'll be in new business, I think. So, any more comments on the financial results for the quarterly update? Then we need to make a motion, I believe, to accept the financial statements for the quarter.
So moved.
Do I
Second?
have a second?
Mr. Rost,
Yes.
Mr. Alsbach,
Yes.
Mr. Veroni,
Yes.
Mr. Blair.
Yes.
Okay, well, next on the agenda is the quarterly income tax update. Some of that was discussed already in the financial update, but I guess we can take a look at this. If anybody has any questions specifically, it dives down a little bit deeper into the sources of the growth in the income tax. Mike?
So are we looking at the income tax of 5.8 million, right?
Yes.
What's in the budget for 22? Remind me.
So in 22, great question. I don't recall off the top of my head. I believe we have a 1%
I
increase.
thought did you state earlier it was 5.6 million?
That was the income tax.
Yes.
Right. But,
So what's the number?
so for property,
I'm sorry, you were asking for income tax or property tax?
Income.
Okay, that's what I thought, income tax.
income, right, that is pretty close to 5.6, I believe. So as of now, that would reflect a slight
That's good.
rollback.
So going forward, we're probably going to exceed that at some point based on the trends we're seeing. Now, I know 20 was a bit depressed, is that right, compared to 19?
So 20 was still an increase. It wasn't, I believe Dave had an estimate that, if everything else aside, that was going to be the year that the city was going to eclipse 5 million for the first time. Didn't quite happen. It was 4.9. Yeah, we've been trending up the last few years.
Well, it's something to keep an eye on because it's certainly trending up quicker than I think we anticipated.
Sure. I would be hesitant to say it's going up another 17%. That's a rate of growth that I wouldn't want to bet the farm on and start spending, assuming that's coming in. But I think growth is the way we're going.
And Mike, I would add that one thing I would add though, from a standpoint of the Commerce Park, where the city invests every tax incentive there, potential anything that we can do. Keith McCluskey's not only built his enterprise but expanded his enterprise. Those are the kind of things that the city does, Tom and Eva, behind the scenes that people don't really quite understand. It's not uncommon for us to have a conversation and that is our job. That Commerce Park's purpose is, and we just now invested in the streets up there, and paving those roadways. It is not uncommon for us, Tom and I, to have a conversation for Mike's Car Wash. And it would go something to the tune of, I need to put a significant addition onto my property. And by the way, I'm getting courted by another community. What are you going to do? And believe me, this is the kind of stuff that cities deal with. So what did the city do? grabbed his hand and walked him through the process, did everything we potentially could to keep him staying as he grows and grows and grows and grows. And that's a big part of what the city does that you don't really hear much about. The city worked very hard, me, Tom, Eva, to get Oasis where Oasis is. You know, that was, city owned that property, city sold that property, city got rid of that. I mean, those are the kind of things that are pretty important because it's a large percentage of the income tax. And income tax is general fund money, and general fund money can be used towards what needs to be done in the city. So, and it's funny, we don't even have anywhere near the tax incentive programs that like a Milford does, who is our competition. And that's a big part of it. So Tom Carroll, who was the city manager before me, worked hard to get him at the time, which was its workhorse now, but beforehand. So that Commerce Park is really, really important. We're down to basically one parcel, and we're sort of very selective in trying to work with getting that one filled. But that's sort of the end of it.
I think in general, I think a lot of employers are increasing salaries beyond the normal 1%, 2%, 3%, except for maybe government. Which I think is only going to be a bonus for income tax collections. I don't know what you're seeing, Greg, but with inflation running so high, I think employers don't have a choice.
No, they do not.
Which is going to just benefit the city, I think, in terms of income tax collection.
Well, we still have a fair amount of growth opportunity with firms like McCluskey.
Keith McCluskey purchased most of a lot of those are panhandles where the properties on his side were largely using the frontage, and the area behind him is what he purchased and expanded through flag parcels. The Commerce Park, when the Maddox property gets developed, that'll be largely it. As far as that goes, that will be sort of the end of the future development. I think, as Tom would tell you, the real future from the city is a complete and total revitalization of Loveland Madeira Road. That would be, through the comprehensive plan, is really, I think, your biggest future, and development of properties like Chestnut Street.
So Loveland Madeira Road's a big contributor. But what kind of gets overlooked a little bit too with the Commerce Park is that addition with McCluskey Chevrolet was brought on back in 2019 because he changed his program to doing online sales. That's a new kind of thing. He went through the patent process, secured those properties. I worked with him in Ready Cincinnati so that he could get the funding for it. And it brought in a little over 200 jobs. It's a 24/7 operation. They're not the highest paying jobs, but that is what we really try to target in that area. And so, and just this morning we got a little bit of a preliminary site plan for the last parcel in the Commerce Park, and I'll go on the record, saying that it's not fit. It's something that we're going to look more at something else because what it is storage and warehouses, and we've seen a
trend. Maybe it is COVID related. I find it ironic. The last two interests in this particular parcel are very similar. And the way it is sort of I'm going to use Mike Veroni. So Mike Veroni is pretty much working out of his home. And what they're trying to do is set up these areas where Mike can work from a place in the Commerce Park, but Mike can have a little bit of a clubhouse. He can have some storage. He can have this whole type. I'm just using Mike as an example. Joe Smith is able to move into, but the net result is that we end up with 20 employees who may not even technically be getting their paychecks from the city. Do we really want to use our final parcel? And that is really our job, is to look at these with such a fine tune, because nothing against Fred Smith who's doing that, but they want to get out of the house, see, and they want to have these little complexes, but they also want to have some storage for their boats and their other things. And wow, 30 suites with, well, let's be honest, the city's real estate tax, that's not what the Commerce Park is about. Why does the city have a CRA, a Community Reinvestment Area program? Because we largely abate all of the real estate taxes to get the income taxes. I wouldn't even want to give something like that as a CRA.
Well, and what's more is we have going to what Mr. Kennedy's saying is we have with the CRA to protect it a little bit, but our code, it's not a permitted use. So we have a good code in place that can kind of filter those things out. Long story short is what's a really good nugget is coming to kind of a close, and we got to get creative on how we can maximize the use of the land.
Okay, well,
Just one new
Yeah,
question
okay, Greg.
that just kind of popped up as we were talking through the comparison here on packet page 119. If you look at the chart, kind of the June and July months is where I think a lot of that, I'll call it overage, really hit. Just out of curiosity, any insight as to why, would it be predominantly in those 2 months?
I don't know of anything specific there. I mean, we are consistently over in most of the months, but yeah, there is
Indeed,
a
yeah, that
big
one
jump
just kind
there.
of jumped out and.
Sure.
I don't,
I can ask Dawn about that and see, what area was it? Was it more withholdings, maybe seasonal jobs or things like that?
I just wondered whether or not the withholding was up because people were claiming
Loveland, yeah.
local tax.
And I think it's more of, understanding that will help us. If that's a leading indicator around when do we know that, hey, we're going to meet or exceed the budgeted collections for 2022.
So this gets back to that whole discussion that we had about the forecasting model, if you guys remember, that I helped put together, which took, and what we found in these trends is that there are spikes in the revenue that we get at the city. It's not an even distribution month to month to month, and there's a variety of reasons for that. But the forecasting model collapsed down to give you the smallest amount of error at certain points in the year, and that's what we had used. What caused us to deviate from that is the fact that we went with Rita, and we end up getting some perturbations that show up under Rita when they decide to pay us and not.
Okay.
And that's when Mike started re-looking, could we reconstitute that forecast model? And the intent of the forecast model was based on historic trends. You can say by the end of the first quarter, what's our probability that we have and should see the resources that we're projecting for the year based on historic trends. And as that goes through, your error band changes and can collapse. But it lets you manage the budget so that you can say, all right, I'm going to watch how much I'm claiming for revenues and make sure that our expenditures are appropriately balanced. So if we look at the increases that we may see this year due to salaries, due to inflation, we're also tracking with that the expenditures of fuel, personnel, and others, and making sure that the two are going hand in hand, and so that we don't capitalize. I think we're going to capitalize on growth in revenue and not be wary of the growth in expenditures. So we just have to watch and make sure that while we think we're going to do better than what we're claiming, we may do worse on expenditures as a result. So that's the caution here.
I think that's why we're at 5.6 in our budget.
Yep.
Yes, exactly.
Add to it, as I said, it was kind of across the board in all of the areas that the income tax was increasing. Don did mention that there was one company in particular, though, that our income from them was up over $100,000. So just from one company. So if they keep doing that, awesome. If they collapse tomorrow, that could be a problem.
Yeah, okay.
But your projection for 22 is still under the 21 act.
Right, just because when you put it together, who knows? But I'm assuming we'll pass it pretty easily.
And again, historically, the balance here is to not claim more revenue to allow council to spend more by thinking they have more revenue than they do. So this adds the conservatism to the budget, which you may or may not like, but it's much to Dave's chagrin, but that's too bad. That's why it is. And then when you look at the breakdown on withholdings, business and individuals, right? I mean, 2/3 or 3/4 of what we get out of withholdings, the individuals make up the rest, and businesses is kind of the trickle, but the percentages were predominantly the withholdings that went up 17%, and that's, 2/3 of our revenue.
Do we have any more discussion on the quarterly income tax update for fourth quarter? Okay, let's move on. The next item on the agenda is the 2022 Fire Levy.
Okay. So as you recall, in July, Chief Huber was here to give an update on our performance for our fire funds. There are currently 4 levies. Last one was passed in 2014. Typically design a levy to last 5 years and then do everything you can to keep it going. We're looking to get about, I believe it was 8 years is what we were getting off this one. So that's would be deemed a success. But it is time. If you look in the backup, which was provided at the last council meeting, you can see that the combined fund balances for those 4 funds starting to dwindle away. That's just the nature of these fire levies. So the amount you pay for a fire levy is kind of stuck at that moment in time. As your home or business or whatever might increase in value, the taxes that you pay does not increase with it. It's set. So if you have relatively set revenues, but you have expenditures that increase every year for maintenance, personnel, contractual agreements, eventually, it's not going to. Eventually, you're going to need some more funds. Your balance is going to go negative, and that's the chart that you see on packet page 123. Just shows exactly that. Fund balances are going along fine, 22 and 23, but by the time you get to 24, you're kind of in that area where you have a little bit money, you'll make it through the year, but as things ebb and flow throughout the year, you might have cash flow issues. So maybe this month you wouldn't be able to pay a bill and you have to wait till the next month. We don't want to get into that situation at all. We want to have a little bit of wiggle room, especially if an apparatus breaks or anything like that happens. So as I said, this is the backup that was given to council last week. We had a resolution. There actually a 2-step process to get something on the ballot for an additional levy. You have to submit a resolution to Hamilton County, which we are in 3 counties, but for things like this, Hamilton takes care of everything since it's the largest one. We sent them a request saying, hey, what is the valuation of the city? And what would we get if we passed a levy at X mills? And it is their job to do that math, tell you how much the taxable value of the city is, and then essentially how much you would get from that. So we sent them a request for 1.75 mills. I have not received a response yet. I'm looking to get that in the next day or two so that we can do the second step, which is passing an ordinance to get the ballot measure on for May and go to the voters for them to decide.
Are all the 4 current levies, are they continuing levies?
Yes, and as Chief Huber told us, they started in an era where not only do we get that basic revenue, we also get what's called the rollback fund, which is money received from the state. The rules for that changed. I don't recall which governor he said it was changed at, but any new levy will not get that rollback. Because of that, the previous levies are going to stay. They're grandfathered in, so they get a little bit of extra money. So while it might be a little cleaner to take those off and roll everything up into one, that would not be advantageous to us. Plus, that would mean the millage rate that we're asking for would be a lot higher, so there might be a little sticker shock, even though the total amount wouldn't be quite that high.
Which ones are grandfathered in? Do you know?
All that we have.
All of them? So when did the law change? After 2014?
2016, I believe it was K6. Yes, it was 2016, around the same time that the city lost the inheritance tax, the estate tax. So the city was sort of hit with two double whammies. The estate tax, which, as Rob will tell you, was large in part helped supplement the road program, and was large in part why the city was so actively annexed the lodge property. And that has completely did a turnaround on the city. So
Local government fund pays to us, the state, budgeted, for the roads. So, this is, we have.
Yeah.
Local government fund. Takes it,
If you look at the history of the road, the paving projects that we've done over the years, they took a huge hit from those times when, I mean, what I know of the city history, we took a huge hit to our entire financial structure.
the loss of the local government fund was a big deal to the city. While they touted balancing the state budget, they largely did it on the backs of local governments. And luckily, the city was able to help circumvent that with the income tax, real estate valuations. Otherwise, obviously, it would have been different. But that's not just a saying, it's true. That's how they balance. One of the ways they balanced the budget was on taking away local funding. Then touting consolidation, which they actually never wanted to consolidate. Hey, it never actually worked. It was just talking points. So ODOT's not going to all of a sudden come through and plow the city streets. Consolidation. It's not going to work that way. It doesn't work that way. So meanwhile, we have city residents, two of whom are sitting here today, that expect a certain level of services. You saw that. Just drive into the city during a snow plow day and notice you don't need corporation limits to know when you're in the city when there's a snow plow. You know there is because you just entered into the city because your streets are clear. That's what our residents expect. Recycling, brush pickup, all of the things that our residents expect, we try to maintain, even though we had a state government working against our revenue. So.
And again, just for some background, the beauty of being in 3 counties is that we have a number of state reps and folks that we have a good network with, and I've had a good network with them. We had a good sense of the cuts that the state wanted to make. So years prior to the state removing the local government fund and the estate tax, we started making cuts and adjustments. That's why we went to RETA. That's why we made some of the adjustments that we did, because we saw that coming. There's a number of us, myself included, that spent a good number, several days up at the State House testifying about this whole discussion around consolidation. And that's when we introduced all the performance measures. And when we had that, and all that data, we could go show how we compared ourselves operationally to other communities our size, right? And that also, we could use the Loveland Sims Fire Department from a consolidation and contract basis to show how we were leading the pack with regards to keeping services high at the lowest possible expense. And those are the things that we went to the State House with as examples. But, I've had multiple conversations with Gene Schmidt and others who are up there now about trying to rebalance that equation because the state took advantage of local communities, whether they're municipalities or townships. But the intent is to try and get some of that back. And so I'm still having conversations with state reps to try and wiggle that back some. So keep our fingers crossed, but I wouldn't count on it.
Well, we just went through a situation where we were involved with sort of in competition with cities versus townships earlier last year about, you know, how the state revenue was going to be distributed, and we thought it was going to go one way. Unfortunately, it did. It went the other way, and you know, basically, a lot of our financial wherewithal is based on revenue monies and decisions that are made in Columbus, and not local. If it's open for discussion, I'd just like to say, you know, that in my conversations with the chief, a reasonable way to look at these is that they're stacked. It's not like one comes off and we have to replace it. These levies get stacked because the costs that the city has to bear for the fire department increase over time. And any way you look at these numbers, it seems to me that we're getting a good value for our fire EMS contract over the years, and I think nobody likes a levy, but I think a 1.75 levy is reasonable and can do the trick. Most likely, given the fire department's history, longer than the projected time frames. So I'll support.
Does anybody know why there were two in 2006?
I believe one was fire and one was EMS.
It was,
Okay.
Right, so we had a split of
right.
the way we covered out of, so we had prior levies that were both fire and EMS, then we had it split out as separate levies. And you're right, they stack, but because the way levies work with current dollars, right, they lose, unless you have, you know, new buildings or other things, those levies go flat.
To the point you made earlier about inflation in real estate prices may rise property taxes, but it's not going to raise.
It doesn't, it's
It
at
doesn't
the,
raise the levy tax.
no, it's the day that they were passed, you get assessed a dollar. That dollar's fixed.
Right, and as you notice on packet page 122, it shows you the approved rate. So currently of the four is 8.95, but then it mentions an effective rate. That speaks to that as well. You're really not paying that on the current value, it's on the past. So it definitely goes down. So it's down to, for residential, 6.786.
Right, and you'll get two, one either due to renewals, right, or growth.
Right.
That's the only way they change over time is either you renew them at current assessed values or growth that was in addition to the initial set.
Right, and I believe renewal would be the same thing as doing a new one. We would lose that rollback amount.
Yeah.
So these are going to stay on as is.
And I felt it was important to include just sort of a contract summary. In 2014, the city was able to negotiate the contract where the city went down to 45% and Sims Township went to 55%. They have more fire runs. We have more EMS runs. As Frank Klein had a lot to do with that and getting that taken care of. So that was so we are currently at 45%. I try to give you the summary on that, and it comes out to an average of 4% since 2015. I don't know. I could have went back farther. I just deal with my lifetime here. I don't know beyond what it was beyond that, but that's a pretty good summary. I think you'll notice in 2020, some of that was peak time staffing. We needed to increase peak time staffing in Station 63. I will also have you know that slide 4 and slide 5, which are more or less projective type items, do not include any debt service on a new fire station. Those are just straight up operational items. I think that's important to note.
So the stacking idea goes away now. Is that correct? We still keep these 4 levies on the books, but going forward, we only will have a new levy. So this whole stacking thing goes away.
Gonna stay.
They stay.
No, these stays, but I'm saying the new one, once it,
It's on top of the old.
the-
But we could refinance that one without consequences.
right, it just seems every time you stack something, the number should get smaller if you're stacking, like a ladder. So I'm looking at the 1.75 for the new levy, and I'm questioning why is it 1.75? Who came up with the number? What's the logic behind? I'm not saying it's wrong. I'd just like to see the number.
Sure. That's just kind of an estimate we have when we did our last debt item, which was refinancing some debt and also for the Public Works building, which we brought here and it's on the books now. We kind of got a better idea of what we think the assessed value of the city is going to be, and that's kind of what we used for that amount. So my goal usually for funds like this is to have about a 10% fund balance, and we think this is what gets us there.
But the number would be finalized once we get the feedback from Hamilton County.
Correct. We're hoping we have to have that amount for the next council meeting so we can finalize the ballot measure. But that's kind of what we thought, given the information that we got from all of 3 of the counties when we did the last debt in the spring, I believe.
And historically, if you look back, back in like the 70s, when you didn't quite have the technology and the ability to go on auditor sites, and it was not uncommon for the city back in the 70s to pass 3 resolutions of necessity. Hey, ask them 1.5, ask them 1.7, ask them for 2, and send all 3. Well, in today's technology, with way auditor sites are available and valuations, it's much easier. So rather than pass like they would in the 70s, multiple, because they really didn't know, they were just sort of hoping to see what would happen. Now the Marks of the world, finance directors of the world, have the ability to really fine tune a lot more in, and that's why we only did 1 resolution of necessity.
Because you get back a certified revenue from the counties once you tell them what you want, right?
Right, and really, technically, once you get one, it's just an equation. So it's your assessed value. That's really the number that you're getting. And the millage could be whatever. That's X.
So the 1.75 isn't a firm. We could change that based upon what number comes back from the county.
I don't know. Dave says no.
We approved that in council.
We did.
So the resolution that the council passed last Tuesday was 2 parts. It passed 2 parts. One is it established the necessity, resolution of necessity. There's a necessity for this. Okay, we've established that there's a necessity. Second step in that same legislation was, okay, Hamilton County Auditor, how much would 1.75 give the city based on all the numbers? That number comes back in. The ordinance is written. That number gets inserted into the third therefore. And that, but rather than throw out 3 different resolutions, Chief Huber, our finance director, were able to have a pretty good grasp what 175 would bring in. So they only asked for 175. 175 would allow the number to be what we need the number to be to maintain the 10% that Mark is talking about. And we know that the day it goes in, technically it's beginning to decrease in valuation because that's how they work. So I think it's cleaner, it's more transparent by just sitting there and asking for one number. And if Mark and Ott did their homework, which they did over the course of the summer, they settled on 1.7 based upon what we think our contract improvements will be and so on and so forth.
But if you are wrong, you could go back and do it again, technically, but you would miss the
May.
submission date to be on the ballot in May. So you're back up from your submission date to be on the ballot because the county requires, Board of Elections requires the date in advance to provide to be on the ballot. So we're fixed in unless we don't want to go to May.
We can't suggest a change.
Or you can suggest it.
I mean, so you can't vote on it if you want. Yeah. Why are we discussing it?
Awareness.
Do we have a,
I mean, do we have any input on this, or is it a done deal?
Well, it's not done until it's voted upon. As we talked about during the summer, when we brought this forward, this group, agreed with the need and supported that of moving forward with the levy. This is bringing back a little more solid information that we have. If you all of a sudden you say, put the brakes on, we don't support this anymore, then we would bring that to council as well.
do we have a pro forma estimate of, all the charts are without a levy?
Right.
Do we have a pro forma with?
So the last estimate that we had is that this could bring in about $700,000 per year.
Okay.
So if it would be passed in 22, the money would start coming in 23.
Okay.
And again, this is not capital improvement, this is
Operating?
the cost of running a fire department.
Right. All those numbers you see, there's no additional debt service in it. It's just for as of today.
Okay. And then the potential for a new fire station gets covered out of the new levy, or how does that?
Right. We could see if it would depend on when we do it, how much it is, and any number of things, and then we can see where it
So
where
then
it
there
slides
could
in.
be capital coming out of the levy. Is that what you're saying?
Correct, because all of our
Can't you just said there wouldn't be? What do you know?
Understanding was that this levy was to pay for the costs of running the business.
right.
A new fire station, as I understand it, will be a separate financial transaction. Not part of the levy.
It's all part of this. If we move forward with the fire station, which we have tentatively on the books for 2023, the construction, we would have to get debt service for that fire station. The sale of Station 63, which we would anticipate a pretty significant amount of money from the sale of Station 63, we would utilize to offset. We would basically clean up existing fire debt. We would take that money towards that. Not going to be able to sell the fire station until the new station is completely constructed. They've moved in. I've gotten rough estimates of what the city could anticipate for the fire station 63, and it is a significant number. And we would not try to offset the cost. I would likely pay down the training tower debt and other debts that would reduce what you're seeing here, because this includes that debt. It's not $3 million. Let's just say the fire station is $3 million. The city property, we purchased that property from the general fund. I did not purchase that property utilizing fire funds. That's not what I used. We used general operational funds to purchase the fire station. But in turn, the city does own the fire station. We own all assets. The LSFD is not permitted to own anything. You'll notice, for example, let's just say I got a grant for a new staff car. As soon as they get the car, they immediately turn it over to the city. They cannot own anything. So I would anticipate potentially up to a third of the cost of the fire station in potential revenue on Station 63. There's a pretty significant value on that. I wouldn't put it towards the new station. I would make a significant pay down on the existing debt of the fire station. I just don't know what the total cost is. Buying the property made complete sense for the city at this point in time. We bought it from the Firefighters Association. We actually paid less for it than they did 1 year ago today. From a standpoint of why are we moving out of Station 63? Because of the traffic issues we create. If we touch the building, we have to elevator it. It would significant cost. So if you're going to purchase, if one of the reasons you're leaving a fire station is because it is unsafe, it's a traffic hazard, it doesn't meet any codes, we're constantly bumping things, Then we're going to build up the street and still have to back in all of our apparatus. That's why this particular property, because O'Bannon runs behind it, it'll be a pull-through station. It is a substation. So it made complete sense. If we don't build the fire station until 24, if we don't build this fire station until 25, owning that piece of property made complete sense for the city. And getting it for the price that we received it, that was a great bargain for the city. Knowing that, I don't know, I'm certainly not going to charge the fire station because I may or may not. Obviously, the plan is to build a new station there. So there's so many unknowns with it.
But Mark, you said that this estimate of 1.75 is about how much in current year dollars? 700, roughly?
Correct.
So if you look at page 123 by inspection, you're sitting here saying the service life of that, because we're probably deficit spending today, well, I won't say deficit, but relative to the revenue that we have today, you're off by about $300,000 to $350,000 in 2022. That with 4% growth year after year, that'll break even around 2028. So the service life of this, without any real increases or renewals, should be 8 to 10 years, depending on that contract rate. So that kind of number makes sense when you think about it from my perspective, just kind of breaking it down, Mike, if that helps at all. Does that make sense?
Okay, one more question, maybe. What's the median home price for a house in Loveland? We know that, like 250, 200?
The 2020 census,
And we're looking at 60-something dollars for 100,000, which I think is a good measuring stick, but I'm just, what's the average taxpayer going to pay?
$61 for a $100,000 home, or $30.50 a half. This is, as of the 2020 census, the city's median value of owner-occupied housing units is $201,000. Owner-occupied.
Yep.
Do we know whether or not the school district is putting a levy on the ballot? Does anybody know?
As far as we know, there's nothing on for May.
Do we know whether the levy applies to commercial property?
Right, all taxable property.
All taxable. So the average house may be worth $201,000. But their Commerce Park, all the businesses along Loveland here, all the businesses down here, also end up paying a chunk as well, correct?
Yeah, I believe so. We wouldn't be allowed to just pick here and there where we want a particular tax to apply to.
And did I see a number in here where it's something like 60% from residential? The levy hits 60% of residential and maybe 40% commercial?
I'm not sure about that.
$700,000 comes from, what percentage of the $700,000 comes from homeowners? What percentage of the $700,000 comes from businesses? If it's not in here, I understand. I'd like to know that.
Okay, I'm not sure of a breakdown. We can look at it.
Okay.
Is there any action necessary from the commission on this 2022 fire levy? This is informational purposes.
Information. Yeah. Okay. Information only.
Okay,
Because the council's already passed it.
okay.
Right.
Any other discussion on the fire levy? Next on the agenda is old business. Is there any old business? Mike?
just want to welcome Kent to the committee. Welcome aboard. I hope you enjoy working with us.
I hope the limited financial expertise that I bring is somewhat helpful. I must confess that the presence of our newest Loveland Ranger, Paxton Ranger, is of great comfort and solace to me.
But you should get a lot of comfort from the expertise that's sitting at this table, my friend.
Given the expertise that he brings, the institutional knowledge, I've had a couple of conversations with Mr. Colangelo that really scared me. He's so smart. Getting to know Mr. Medler, I'm the piccolo in the marching band.
Like I said, I agree with Mike. You know, the beauty, Kent, is the ability to ask the different perspective, right?
Yes.
It's what you bring to this is a different perspective than some of us that have seen this over and over, seen the migration and the tools, and right. So to me, that's a tremendous amount of value, which is to bring in that diversity of thought. So I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you. I know Dave very, very seldom does, so. One of my goals, when I joined council was to ask as off-beat questions as I possibly could. And Dave has, at one point, commented that it empowered him to, as he puts together the agenda and the documents for the council meeting, to think, what is that son of a gun going to ask? Yeah, that's why I say son. Yeah. 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 Thank you. Welcome aboard. Thank you, sir.
Anything else for old business? The next on the agenda is the Finance-O-Matic worksheet. We don't have anything scheduled for today, although there's a TBD listed where the parking garage update is, and I don't know, maybe we can ask Dave for an update.
I submitted a large application to the Economic Development Administration. I've not heard a word from them. I inquired in early December how it was going. Just to see, to get a trigger, they said, still working on it. Thanks, Dave. So that's where all I've done to this point.
Well, that submission was like July, August, right?
Please?
The submission of the grant was in the summer, as I recall.
No, I worked on it all summer. I didn't submit it until sometime in October.
Okay.
You have any idea when they're decisioning that?
I decided not to push him anymore. I
Yeah.
took that email as, don't call us, we'll call you.
Okay.
And I'm not a pushy sort, and it's not going to help me by pushing. So,
So we'll keep it TBD until you email us and tell us that they reach out to you.
One other comment, if you don't mind.
Sure. Rob?
One of the things is Dave mentioned about the water system. When we first went for our Moody's rating, and it reminded me when I see it on here as an update on some of the measures. When we first went, one of the comments that we got back from Moody's with regards to our bond rating was the strength in our financial system and predominantly the strength in our water system. Because at the time, we didn't have the kind of strength in our budget we have today, but we always kept the strength of the water system. Our finance director at the time, Mr. Taphorn, took it as a personal mission to make sure that that water system was protected and we had good revenues. Unfortunately, when MSD and the county came in to raise their rates to raise $3+ billion on the backs of everyone, including Loveland, right? We've held back on raising our rates because the residents of Loveland are paying to fix $3 billion worth of problems in Hamilton County. Unfortunately, that meant that our water system has suffered because when you get your bill right? Your water bill or your utility bill is broken down, and you get that bill. It shows water, it shows stormwater, it shows sewer, and the preponderance of your bill is sewer. And so Dave's comment is correct, in that the water system has to be, as an enterprise fund, solvent onto its own. And we've always had the ability to leverage the dollars out of the water fund to manage that infrastructure. And it has to be, and we can't today. So it has to be brought back to be healthy. And unfortunately, it's going to create some pain. And we tried multiple times to try and get out of that contract with MSD, and we're currently stuck based on the 6th District Court ruling. So, you know, we filed that to go all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. We got rejected to abide by the 6th District Court because at the time they were busy hearing the healthcare, Obamacare, whatever you want to call it. That's what the U.S. Supreme Court took on instead of Loveland states' rights issue of contracts. So we're stuck dealing with MSD's rates because of our contract. And that's why that bill, you looked at those checks that we had remitted at the end of the year. Why is that bill so high? That's paying MSD for the sewer.
We're
Would we
remitting.
want to add the water system analysis to make that a
Finance-o-matic
finance-o-matic item?
worksheet. It's not a bad idea.
Because Dave will have to have that analysis done to bring to council, so it'd be good to see it here and how it's going to make sure that we've got a capital improvement fund, and when does that start building? Because it's going to take time, right?
Is that a April target? Or the other piece, the other question I had is, I mean, we have a number of items that are due here in April.
We
Just
do.
want to make sure that, you know, are we going to be able to review all that in April, or do we maybe adjust the schedule?
With Mike not being here on the cash flow review, I'd probably just leave that for now.
It's not for nothing. The city of Loveland has a very good sewer plant. We own the plant.
Yep.
It's our plant. But as Rob said, we're pretty much held hostage.
Yep.
By MSD. And periodically it comes up, you know, can we get out of that deal? Because we can service Loveland far into the future with the sewer plant that we have, if we could control it, and we don't. In fact, I believe, I'm not certain, that there's some deferred maintenance needed for the sewer plant that we haven't been able to do because we're beholden to MSD. Is that right?
We have not been, because part of our contract was MSD has to operate that facility, and they have been taking on all of the improvements and maintenance.
Okay.
Now, there's a pretty big discussion we could have probably somewhere else at some time around the history behind all of that, with regards to what our rights are under the 208, and there's, I mean, a tremendous amount of research that we did to try and protect the residents, right? It works the way it is, but the city of Loveland is paying for Hamilton County's past issues.
They're fixing stuff over on the west side.
And ours,
On our water.
Right.
And the
Our water.
Mill Creek, yeah.
and our plant is already a gold star, gold medal
Yeah.
sewer facility. No improvements are needed. We keep beating on them to keep our capability and capacity in reserve for the city, so that they've leveraged it to Warren County, they've leveraged it to a lot of people. But the dollars are all leaving Loveland, and we could operate it at a fraction of the cost, and which is why we took that task on. We're stuck under the court ruling. The problem is, unfortunately, what we've tried to do is make up for it to the residents' pocketbook by not charging for our water to operate it the way we need. And unfortunately, we're gonna have to correct that. And we have no means to change the sewer equation. So I don't know
I'll
if
look
they,
for a recommendation to add this to the Finance-O-Matic worksheet, if that's what you want to do. Yes? I know something that we talked about during budget was the minimum and how we thought that was going to right-size our fund, but I guess that's not happening. So,
Saved our Easter
yeah,
to a certain extent. It really helped us in multifamily units, and because it was so across the board. I have no idea what we would have dealt with that if we hadn't had that modification. The projections that we had as far as revenue from that were almost dead on. I believe we anticipated around 225 if it went in place, and we saw that in relation to same time last year before we put that in place. It's just water savings, a lot of other items. I actually thought with so many people working from home, we'd see a greater increase in that, but no one can really tell. But meanwhile, we're doing not just remember, you've got the treatment portion of the plant and you have the distribution portion of the plant. It'd be nice if only one of them needed work. They both do. So, and that's a big part of it. What we're fortunate is, forethought of former city manager, we are good as far as supply in the air. It would really be a whole different world if I was sitting here today and we needed to invest in a whole new tower. Holy cow.
Yeah.
I don't know how we would pull that off. So, but it's what you don't see, which is under the ground, that is crumbling largely in the heights.
And John, I recall that conversation as well as we put together the budget. So the request I would have for this Finance-O-Matic item is, what's required to get it right, not a further incremental improvement. I mean, let's have the report on, what is the full pain that has to be taken, and then we can look at that and decide, what's the right path.
Yep. I would just call it water revenue analysis, or maybe you're right, maybe it should be water system analysis. It took the city bringing in that company, Stantec, that came in and did basically the Ghostbusters up and down every one of our roads to really get it through to everyone how far away we were. To a certain extent, a deep dive into our water system, which will require a lot of work from our city engineer, would really be able to put this all in perspective, I think. So I'm wrong in saying it should be water revenue analysis. You were right, Mike. It should be water system analysis, resulting is probably the better way to word it.
Is there a Stantec kind of outfit that can do what they did for the roads to the water system?
No, but we're very fortunate because Cindy already has a tremendous amount of data, drawings preserved. It was Cindy that pointed out how old the water mains are on Main Street. I think it's hilarious, but it's true. So we'll begin working on that. I have a few other things I need to dot, but we'll get started on that.
okay, we'll add that to the Finance-O-Matic worksheet then.
Yeah, and then I would say, which, Dave, I think a couple of those in April have your name on it. Is there one that needs, if we prioritize the water analysis, would one of the other ones need to slide?
Pointing to the
I'm not trying to.
I know, I just.
I'm not really trying to avoid April, but I'll.
If we can do it all, hey, great. I want
I don't know.
to make sure that we're.
Yeah, can you just give me a little bit
Realistic.
of time? I need to talk to Lisa.
Okay.
Because I'm going to handle it from a system standpoint and a revenue standpoint. And I'm going to go do a little bit of a deep dive on how we funded the improvements, water system, distribution and treatment, how we funded those improvements over the past year, how much of those were for zero interest loans and so on and so forth. And then we've got a map that would show you the entire water system in terms of age of the system. And I know that they keep track of every water repair. I just need to gather all of that and probably have Cindy come to that meeting.
Okay.
I'll work on it, so.
Why don't we move the administrative cost recovery from April and push that out to like June? And take that off your plate, Dave? July is our meeting? July. Okay. Anything else on the Finance-O-Matic worksheet? And else we have left? No, we got a few more. Member training packet. That was attached to that. I think we got an email on that too.
Right. There's also email. That's something that Misty just wanted to send out since the group was officially reorganizing. She was not saying anything by that, saying that, hey, you guys need to check this out. Purely just basic organizational information.
There was a deadline on that, I think.
Yeah, there were two separate ones. There was, I think, the one in here and then the one that's we do have to actually complete. And was that by the end of the month?
I don't remember. Was-
Yeah.
I can't remember the date, but I have the email.
Because council changed. Originally, we had delegated Misty and staff to be ones to make sure they were training and passing information on, maybe be certified, but council made sure that pass that burden on to each of the individuals, so that Misty wasn't the only one carrying the burden of doing training. And it's more appropriate that everybody goes through these, Open Meeting Act and the proper training, which is why it's put on us. It's appropriate.
Okay. We've got meeting dates of April 19th and July 19th. We have any conflicts? We're good there. So the next item is staff and committee comments.
Just one on the dates, Mark, will you be able to send out invitations for those just so we can?
Absolutely. And
Thank you very much.
Yep. And those dates kind of follow the same that we had last year. Just kind of assumed. If it doesn't work out, let me know. But I'll send an invite.
Thank you.
I just want to thank members of the public for showing up. As I said in council, it's a lot more people, it's a lot more fun to do these meetings, any kind of meeting, when you've got an audience, both for the successes, failures, and bad jokes that you tell. So, thank you for coming.
If I may, just one last.
Sure.
Relative to the question, Mr. Governor, you asked with regards to who pays taxes, we years ago did a pretty extensive study to look at that, and you can see in our budget what's broken down for withholdings, personal, like individuals as well as businesses. When you really start to break that down, it gets very complex because of our the reciprocal agreements that we have and how that difference works for each individual. So for somebody like myself who pays to Evendale, there is a differential that I do pay to Loveland, right? But it's not the full amount, it's some differential. So you'll find historically that percentage of individuals moves around depending on what changed in the state law. That's a fair amount of digging that staff's going to have to do to actually break that down to that level of detail. So when you think about it, you may want to, my ask of you is to think about what is it you're really looking for from a question perspective to help staff so that it's a clear ask and we're not digging a lot of information and spending a lot of staff time if it doesn't get to what you're looking for. Okay, so yeah, I mean, you have to pay your own taxes and whether you pay in the city or not, and you know how, everybody's got their own story. But how we break that down with the tax staff And in that study, in that process, it has to be done so we protect individuals' information, right? We can't break it down and have information by individual or business, what they pay, leak out of that office. So it has to be protected appropriately. So I just asked to just refine what you're thinking about so that staff has a clearer direction. I think I know where you're trying to head, but I'd ask you to be clear so I don't make it up for you. Okay, thank you.
Are there any other comments from staff or commission? Okay. Got a motion? Do I have a second?
Second?
Mr. Alsbach,
Yes.
Mr. Veroni,
Yes.
Mr. Blair. Yes. Mr. Rost.
Yes.